W-Y-E-T-H. Put in the first slide, please. Probably one of the most popular, famous, and appealing artists, American artists, alive today is Andrew Wyeth, W-Y-E-T-H, an American artist who was born in Chatsford, Pennsylvania in 1917 and is still living today and gaining a tremendous amount of popularity. He is one of the few artists ever to receive the Presidential Medal, which he received a few years ago, and have major retrospective exhibitions in Chicago, Pennsylvania, Los Angeles, the New England states, and be honored by being included in the top American museum collections at the Metropolitan, the Museum of Modern Art, the National Gallery in Washington. His paintings, painstakingly done, most in either a dry brush technique or in the age-old pre-Renaissance technique of tempera painting, are done in minute little brush strokes, a technique that is very appealing to the draftsman because it's almost like drawing carefully in paint, completing only 2 or 3 major canvases each year, each of them selling between $60,000 and $100,000. His watercolors, which he does many of in preparation for final paintings, and his pencil sketches, which are elegant, beautiful things, on the auction market today sell for around $10,000 to $15,000. He was the son of N.C. Wyeth, who was a very famous illustrator, especially that of children's books, of Robinson, Crusoe, other children's books of the early 20th century. Andrew Wyeth was a fairly frail youngster and was taken out of school at an early age and trained by his fathers in the rigid discipline of draftsmanship and anatomy, and was constantly taught to draw the human figure so that if you ever came up against a problem, you would know immediately how to solve it, that he could draw the human figure in any position that he cared to and have the knowledge of what went on and what happened. His work sort of falls in about 3 different categories. The early phase, after 16 years old and seeing a Winslow Homer show, became sort of explosive, fresh watercolors that had a very spontaneous appeal to them. The second phase that he entered after 1945, after his father was killed in an automobile accident, becomes a more austere, simplified version. And the third phase, falling about 1964, is that of portraits, which he has done in recent years. All of his paintings were done around 2 areas in the United States, Chatsford, Pennsylvania, and Cushing, Maine. And he takes the same simple subjects of the farmhouses, the barns, the fields, the people in them. And in these very austere, beautifully composed paintings, where every little detail is carefully observed and put down with sort of a memory recollection by the artist that sort of gives the same impression to the viewer of something recalled, a memory of long ago forgotten things. It is not known why Wyeth's paintings have such a wide appeal, both for the layman, the average person viewing them in the museums, and the art historians that have placed him as one of the top realist painters in the United States, especially after 50 years of very abstract painting, how one who is so confined within the rigid discipline of academic type painting could be such an important figure and yet not much of a force in the direction of American painting. If one bypasses the superb technique, the almost tour de force effect in his paintings that immediately captures the attention and the praise or admiration of the viewing public, and goes beyond this technical ability into the philosophy of the painting, or what the painting means. According to Wyeth, all of his paintings have an underlying theme of death, the unknown. This was especially clear after his father's after his death in the car accident. A very vital and alive person, as his father was, it greatly influenced the young Wyeth. That this theme runs even stronger. Slide, please. One of his first recollections, or earliest paintings, was a scene that led up to this one, sort of a lonesome, empty house. He and his wife attended an auction by a widow whose wife had died a few years before, and he was, through his loneliness, deciding to move and was selling his home and all the furnishings. The spirit of the wife still was in the house, some of her belongings, the way she had decorated it. And Wyeth felt so sad and melancholy about this man selling his past or his history that he went home and did a painting called Auction Day, and probably only one of the few paintings that he did entirely from memory. But this theme then is constantly renewed and reviewed in his paintings of showing these sort of empty homes, the figures gone, the figures unimportant within the composition, striking sort of geometric, vertical and horizontal emptiness, of odd angles of placing subject matter at close to border edge to fill empty areas of sort of lonesome space. Slide, please. One of the most important people in his life were the Olsons, and they're living near the Olson farm. Of the brother and sister, the sister, Christina, who died just recently, was one of Wyeth's favorite models, along with the tall Negro man that he constantly portrayed. His name was Tom Clark, sort of a tall, lanky, dignified person. And other people that he, again, constantly used as models around Chadds Ford and Cushing, Maine, as subjects within his paintings. Christina Olson was partially or quite crippled from infantile paralysis, and either had to move around by crawling or by wheelchair within the home. But she was strong enough and capable enough of taking care and doing the household chores for her brother. There's a great starkness, almost a lack of any richness to the people who populate Wyeth's canvases. They're sort of sad, they're lonely, they gaze out into the unknown. And this is probably what makes Wyeth's paintings so electric. It's a reflective moment of somebody bringing up of what they have been to this moment, and then wondering about what will happen in the future. It's that quality of the unknown, looking toward the unknown, finding it, that is the main central theme with his work. His color scheme is quite somber. The browns, the blacks, contrasted especially with winter snows of New England and Pennsylvania. The drawing superbly done. Slide, please. He had a studio in the Olson home in the upper areas, upper rooms, very close to his own home. And one day, walking into a fairly warm room, he threw open the window to catch some cool breeze from the river. And it fluttered against the lace window curtains in such a way that he wanted to put down this effect of the wind, the hotness of the room, the sort of dryness of the window shade, the cracks in it, the open window. He waited several months trying to catch the same tight breeze as he could analyze the movement of the curtains floating in the breeze. His work is meticulous. In the dry tempera, or the tempera technique, you take the powdered pigment and mix it with the yolk of egg and then water as a diluting device. But when it dries, it becomes very permanent, as if any of you have broken an egg and tried to clean it up, find out really how sticky and gluey the egg can be. So it actually is the adhesive for the pigment. But working with a water-based paint, it dries rapidly. So rather than work in large areas that you can blend and change, you work with a very fine, fine brush, laying on little strokes, one next to each other, building up the surface richness of the painting. Slide, please. This painting was done in 1947, and it is in the Johnson Wax Collection of American Paintings. When he works in the watercolor technique, there is a freshness to it, working in very wet pigment, very watery. It has a spontaneous effect that you do not find in his temperas or his dry brush technique. The dry brush is actually an opaque watercolor, much like we would use our casings or temperas or acrylics today, but using it with very little water, putting it on quite dry. Slide, please. Most of his work is from nature. He will actually sit in someone's barnyard, go into the room, set up his easel. He decided after a while not to do the watercolor sketches preceding other paintings because these seemed to take the edge, the creativity of the finished work out of it. So he transferred to pencil sketches, beautifully done, working his composition, finding detail so that he can then work up his final tempera painting. His paintings are not usually large. The watercolor is about 21 by 28 inches. Some of the largest oils will go up to maybe 4 feet in dimension, but most of them fairly small in scale. Slide, please. This is Portrait of Carl. It has a weird angle as he sits down below the standing man, looking up toward the ceiling with the hook that was in the barn ceiling, or the room that he was in. But it is beautifully done in sort of an academic way, where the lighting is constant, where every little surface detail is built up to an absolute realistic stage. Slide, please. This is probably one of his best-known paintings, and it is called Christina's World, and this is again a portrait of Miss Olson. As I mentioned, she was crippled by infantile paralysis. The home is in her background, and he found her one day out picking berries in the field. And as she turned around, looked up to her house, he got the impression that this was her world. She was limited by her crippling effect, that this was what really had meaning for her. And he painted her in the field as she rested a moment from picking berries, looking back up to her house. Some people think that this is almost looking too much into a person's privacy or violating their privacy. Except he had a great feeling of warmth. She was a person that influenced his personality a great deal and meant a great deal to him. And he portrayed her not as this sort of lonely person, but well secure within her own little world. The technique of most of Wyeth's paintings, slide please, can be analyzed as you move in closer. where he builds up color tone for the groundwork and then slowly, painstakingly draws in or paints in with that fine temper brush each blade of grass or flower or weed that you might see. Nothing is left to the imagination. Everything is put there. The only thing that it is difficult to translate are the incidents that prompted Wyeth to do a painting, the idea behind it, or the feeling that he has. His titles sometimes are whimsical, sometimes misunderstood, such as in this one, Christina's World. But the title is a key to the incident that he wanted to portray, the feeling within the painting. Slide, please. As in most paintings, slides do not do justice to the work itself. His paintings are smooth, usually worked on wood or masonite panels covered with gesso in the old Sienese technique, and then colors slowly built up over a long period of time. It is not that he has to wait for drying time, because the paints dry very rapidly, but it just takes months and months of work and overwork, slowly building up each tiny detail upon each tiny detail. Slide, please. This painting, with Tom Clark used as the model, he must have done at least 12 where this man was the subject, is called As a Crow Flies By. There's a strong dagger of light that lights the man's eyes. He's sort of crunched over in a fearful position. It is if he is awaiting death, if he is sort of cowering from it, sinking behind the clothing that is hung up on the simple rack that is embedded into the wall. The placement of the figure is typical Wyeth composition, of where this off balance of throwing all of the attention of the subject matter into one area that leaves a tremendous area of open space, this sort of lonely area within the painting, to balance the composition. The crow also is a symbol, a death symbol, and this is one of the reasons of the title of the painting being such. Slide, please. This young boy was a constant friend and companion of the two Wyeth sons. The oldest son of Andrew Wyeth his name is Jamie. The youngest one is Nicholas. And Jamie is sort of following as a third generation in the same footsteps as Andrew Wyeth did with his father, of being trained in the same traditions of painting as his father. The unfortunate thing is that he is much too close. Of course, he's only in his late 20s now, but he's much too close in imitation of his father's work rather than developing a style of his own. In this one, called Young America, this young Chatsford's boy used to be a companion of his two sons, liked to decorate the family cars and the bicycles with raccoon tails and other decorative devices. Wyeth once commented that one of the hardest things he ever had to paint was trying to catch the spokes of the bicycle wheels as they spun around and catching the flashiness of the new chrome on the bicycle. Slide, please. There's another member of the Cushing, Maine set that he paints his farm. His man's name is Teal, T-E-E-L. And he has some boats that are brought in slips within the edges of the land. And he's painted his house several times, and some of his cattle, and some of his boats. Slide, please. This is called The Sexton. This one certainly is more obvious in the general theme of death, where the man is digging the grave. Slide, please. One day he wanted to get a view of the harbor and crawled out on Mr. Teal's roof. And looking past this morning haze that was just rising, that still obscured the horizon line, the rocky coast just becoming evident in the early morning mist, and looking through the lightning rod, through the translucent ball that decorated the past end of the gable of the roof. When Mr. Teal returned, he saw the figure perched up on the gable, painting away. And his only comment was, where were his guinea hens going to roost that night? And then went on into the house. Wyeth has a great affection and feeling for the people that populate his paintings in the area. He's never been to Europe, he's never traveled in the United States, and it's remarkable that in over 30 years of painting that he has found within this very small area subject matter after subject matter to work in his paintings. Slide, please. He walks quite a bit. He is well acquainted with the land, constantly sketching, drawing, observing, trudging over the countryside to become really familiar with it. Although he says most people are disappointed when they get up to around Chad's Ford and Cushing, the area, that all of a sudden the land doesn't look like his paintings. As realistic as they seem to be, they are not representational of the actual scene because much is changed and left out. As I mentioned, his compositions are austere. There's a simplicity to them. So he very seldom shows people now where their paintings were done. Just it's becoming his own world, his own interpretation. He looked down at his boots one day and decided to work it into a composition with the black flowing coat that sort of protects him from the coolish and moist breeze. He says it almost looks like the figure of death stalking the land. Slide, please. Again, sort of a self-representation of himself on a sketching expedition. Slide, please. One day, on one of these expeditions with his son, Jamie, when he was quite young, he had lost something, and Wyeth went back to try to find it. And when he returned, he found the young boy sort of, it's called far away, and the young boy sort of all hugged up in this sitting position, completely lost in daydreams, sort of thinking of a faraway subject. He sketched him and then worked up the painting at a later date and presented it to his wife as a Christmas present. The little boy was wearing a coonskin cap that had been a prior Christmas present, and metal-toed boots that he was very fond of because they had been worn by some young boy during the Civil War. Notice all the beautiful grass patterns. There is an underlying tone, sort of a motley effect put on. And then through these transparencies of tones, constantly build up, and then finally these beautiful little details put on at the very last. Slide, please. Another portrait of Miss Olson. And here she is. She's at this point holding a sick kitten and trying to nurse it back to health. But he does not emphasize the beauty of the woman, although he felt that she had a great inner beauty, with the dark background that highlights that sort of rugged profile, a very strong pattern. Slide, please. One of Wyeth's favorite watercolors belongs to the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston in its collection. Whenever there's an exhibition where he selects the paintings, this one's called Carl's Room, and it is the room of the portrait of the man that we have seen earlier. It is always included, and this is his general size watercolor, about 21 by 28 inches. It's a stark thing, with the light coming in strongly from the left-hand side, a window, hitting against the plaster wall that has had scars and scratches and writings over it. And then again, in sort of Shaker, Pennsylvania tradition, you have the utility board that is embedded in the wall with this little wooden pegs that anything can be held on, and then the rifle that is slung across one of the pegs. Slide, please. This one's called Monday Morning. The wash basket being aired out, sun-dried, ready to accept the clothing. Slide, please. Another major composition is called the Chambered Nautilus. This has great symbolism to it also. And the figure in the bed, although for years it looked to me, the story that I sort of interpreted from it was a young girl that was obviously maybe sick or bedridden in some way, gazing wistfully out the window, wishing she could be out to play. But actually, it's a painting of his 85-year-old grandmother, who has this sort of frail, very frail, youthful appearance. He said he was always sad that he never painted her face close up, but he worked actually within her bedroom. Some days, as she was confined to her room, would open the window and the breeze would blow the hangings on the four-poster bed. In a little basket by her bed that she kept her sort of her world possessions, her Bible, her diary, her whatever sewing or anything that she'd want to do. And at the foot of the bed, the chambered nautilus that is within the confines of its shell, that it builds the shell as it grows, is very much like the woman confined by illness to the room. He also says that with the window opening and the bed curtain sort of floating in the breeze, it's almost as if it was a ship, the ship into the unknown that is carrying the woman finally toward her death. She is gazing out the window where the light comes in and blaring values sort of obliterates the scene and makes it into the unknown. He did some preliminary sketches for this one. Slide, please. And you can see the beauty of the pencil work which he draws. They're crisply, well-defined, beautiful drawings. An elegance and a simplicity to all the detailing. Slide, please. This one's called Granddaughter, and he's used this figure of this little girl several times in different compositions. One we'll see a little bit later, about at a 7-year difference in period, where she was about 15 going to the fair or waiting to go to the county fair that day. But as a little girl, her old grandfather, who would sort of doze away, she kept waking up one day trying to tell him something that was very important within her life, and the old man, losing interest, would slowly nod away again into a nap. And she kept pushing him, and he felt this warranted a painting, or the subject matter of the contact with the spread in generations. Slide, please. This is called Brown Swiss, and it's the house of Howard Teal, this friend whose home he painted several times. And he came upon it one day, on a very quiet day, as the house itself was reflected in the cow's pond in the front. And he did several sketches over different times of the year, some of his cattle, some of the barn, and then finally, by the time he worked into the composition, he stripped away most of the details and worked into a very elegant and slim composition with the house thrown way over to the left, sort of balancing the large area of the fields, the brown fields, to the right. Slide, please. Wyeth was never much of a hunter, and one friend in the neighborhood had these hunting dogs, or coon dogs. The man worked as an automobile mechanic, but his real profession was hunting. He loved to do it, would spend his life at it. And he kept these coon dogs locked up in the barn, just practically starving them, and Wyeth would sneak them food every once in a while. Became friends with the man and was offered to go on a coon hunting trip one evening. Wyeth really didn't favor hunting, but he thought he would like to go along, and see what coon hunting was like. They trudged through the woods all night, lost the dogs for hours, finally found them. He fell into a creek into some water, was absolutely dampened up to the waist, finally got home around 4 a.m. in the morning without having ever seen a coon. And this is the extent of his hunting. Many people have decided through this painting that he must have been an avid hunter. Slide, please. This is a watercolor, beautifully drawn. In some of his watercolors, he leaves a lot of the white paper showing to sort of balance with the freshness of the crisp objects that he draws and displays. Slide, please. This is called Fungus, and it's a study of a tree trunk with fungus on it. His watercolors actually become quite messy with splatters, sort of breaking up the white areas, smudges, finger marks, etc. It's almost like everything's out of focus except the one thing that sort of pulls all of your attention into a very definite spot. Slide, please. The son of the local farmer, Albert. We have a close-up slide. Looking past the head, again at this low-angled view, looking up past the figure. Great amount of space above the head gives sort of a monumental effect to the figure. Slide, please. Winter scene. This is in dry brush because the splattering of the snow over the little water showing into the tree trunk was then done in an opaque white tone. Slide, please. The starkness of the land where he lives is portrayed in the starkness of his paintings and the composition. This one is called Geraniums. Slide, please. He used the figure of his son, who was 16 at the time, as the focal point in a landscape painting. Slide, please. In this one, called Perpetual Care, he has used the church and the cemetery several times in other compositions. But what caught his attention in this one were the plastic flowers in the foreground and their sort of hardness and opaque, garish colors, and the beautiful simplicity of the little wildflowers that were growing around the other gravestones. Unfortunately, this does not come across in this slide, or the beautiful coloring of the little wildflowers is not evident. Slide, please. He painted his wife several times, and this one day he came across her after she had been berry picking, taking a rest in the sort of warmth of the ground, his dog in the background. This one's called Distant Thunder, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the scene except at the time that he came upon this scene. There were claps of distant thunder going on. There was sort of an approaching storm. The dog had just raised his head, sort of pricked up his ears a bit to hear the thunder that had disturbed him, and then quickly laid his head down and went back to sleep. There's a watercolor sketch that he did also, the only difference being that he's put raspberries in the little box rather than blueberries as in the final painting. Slide, please. Up around Cushing, Maine, there's a large lime quarry, and this is called Lime Rock. And he used the massive areas of the white stone with the little bits of grasses that still sort of hang on to the top of the ridge. But beautiful compositions in these stark light and dark patterns. Slide, please. called Lawn Chair. Has the berry bucket hanging on its side. Slide, please. Wood stove. These are the early 1960s now. Slide, please. And here's the same granddaughter again, grown up a bit, all dressed up, ready to go to the county fair. He uses this off-center composition. He has her sort of the shyness that is shown by this young girl. Slide, please. But he takes things, simple things, that he sees around him, that he is familiar with, within his life area. Slide, please. This one called Her Room, sort of a beautiful, empty, surrealistic presentation of the room. The seashell on the table and the little seashells, the collection lined up on the windowsill that admits the light in sort of streaking rays across the green door. Slide, please. And it is thought, sort of very seldom does Wyeth show his sense of humor except possibly in some of his titles. But there is a reflection of the painter in the doorknob in this painting. Slide, please. Again, the bucket now filled with blueberries. The starkness of his composition so staggering. Slide, please. And this, the winter landscape in these sort of dirty brownish green shades sprinkled with the white snow. Exact in every detail. Slide, please. Then in 1964 he began a series of portraits where the head becomes life-size. He throws the background quite dark, where the head is sort of crisp, standing amid the space around it. Slide, please. Slide, please. Slide, please. And one done in 1967 called Spring Beef. Slide, please. For our review, we start back again with the fairly realistic colonial portrait painter, John Singleton Copley, C-O-P-L-E-Y. Slide, please. Gilbert Stuart, also a colonial portrait painter, a little softer, more atmospheric technique. Builds up his tones in sort of transparent layers. Slide, please. George Caleb Bingham, B-I-N-G-H-A-M, mid-19th century landscape Midwestern painter, studied in Dusseldorf, Germany, portrayed the Rockies, Rocky Mountain area of the United States in sort of glorified terms, but a more simple version of the river boatsmen along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Slide, please. Thomas Eakins was a late 19th century realist painter, addicted to absolute correctness and anatomy of shadows and perspective, light usually from a raking low angle. Slide, please.